Well, in this first video of 4, we're going to look at the teacher work sample as in an overview of its 4 components, and then center in on the very first section, which we call uh, contextual factors. The teacher work sample was designed to be a culminating experience for this class, and it's also used in the College of Ed during the professional semester for certification. But here we're going to apply what we learned in our text in the 7 chapters to design and implement an effective study. I think you'll find it quite simple if you understand how to follow the work sample template. Now, the teacher work sample consists of at least a 5-day unit. It doesn't have to be just 5 days. It could be 6, it could be 10, but it usually has to be a minimum of 5 to get all the things that we're going to ask you to do done. Now, it's not conducted in all your classes if you're teaching. It's only conducted in one. And that's the only class that you use to do all the write-up on the contextual factors and the analysis of the data. Now, we're going to review the template, and for each of the sections, there will be a rubric given to you that we're going to look at, and you can make sure using that rubric that you put everything in that section that you needed to meet the criteria. We're asked that you create a timeline for completion. Those students that have done real well get started kind of early, and in fact in this class we start after this week to begin to look at it and get it planned in the first half, and then using the research that we find in our readings, and then by around week 9, and there's no magic number, you'll start to teach that unit, so you have time to get that written by week 16. In the teacher work sample, you'll always have a pre-test and post-test, as well as some formative assessments, but we want to diagnose what the students know, and then as you teach it, use formative assessments to gauge how they're learning it, and then in the post-test, summatively, how did they do. We're asked that you try not to wait to the last minute to getting it written up, because it does take quite a lot of time, as you'll see as we go through the 4 sections. In all of the writing, we're going to ask that you not use any student names or any identifying information of any individual student. You can simply call them student A or student B. To begin the teacher work sample, you'll go to the second week on our Canvas website, and you'll click on the section on teacher work sample, and you'll find the teacher work sample template there. I suggest you just simply download it, the very first thing, so you see what the 4 sections look like, and how you simply type in your answer, and the boxes expand to whatever length your answer is. And then ask that you also click on the rubric and download it and print it out. That way you can have it beside you as you work through your various modules. In using the template, you're simply going to answer the prompts in each of the sections, and there in each of these videos we're explaining possible answers on what they're looking for, what you might add depending on what your unit was about and how you taught it. You can actually use the rubric to evaluate your own responses, because it will be the same rubric that I will use to evaluate. Now, the teacher work sample consists of 4 tasks, 4 sections. The first one is looking at contextual information and the environment that you're teaching in. That is, you're going to look at your school, you're going to look at the specific class that you use, what sort of subgroups you have, and factors that you have. If you don't have a classroom, we're going to give you that fictional information with 25 students that you can use, and with their test scores, with their background, and the like, that you can use to fashion your contextual factors. We'll look at the instructional design, how you put it together, what objectives you're going to use, how they're connected to state standards, and then what activities and formative assessments you're going to use as you teach that lesson each day. Then you're going to look in section 3 at how you taught it, what you did as far as innovative instructional strategies, and a host of different things that we're going to look at in our readings in chapter in our textbook. And then last, you're going to evaluate your unit and reflect upon it. You're going to analyze the data and see what subgroups did well, what subgroups didn't. And that's quite interesting to see how you taught all kids. So that's the teacher work sample in 4 different sections. Let's look at, in this section, the contextual factors, section 1. So in section 1, you're going to have 4 different sections. You're going to look at the background of your community and the district and the school. Then you're going to look at your class, what type of kids were there, and then developmentally, what were some of the cognitive and non-cognitive factors in that class, and maybe pick out some subgroups, either ethnic or gender, or and there'll be a whole list of those things that you can use. And then what are some implications for planning your unit. So we're going to first look at what you're given, so that you can plan your lesson given that. The very first thing in section 1, you're going to be asked to write a narrative, and here's what your box looks like, but it expands as you write. It usually goes about a half a page, but you're going to look at the community that you're in. What sort of school system is it? Is it rural, urban, or suburban? What the population of your district is, the major industries, any characteristics that might define them, how they're ranked statewide, or what awards they've won. But what is your community like? And then you're going to look at, second, the district. How many schools do they have? What's the demographic type of information that would be useful in knowing the number of students, the economically disadvantaged, low SES, percentage of ethnic groups, percentage of students on IEPs, and then last, the details about your district or your school policies that impact. What's your MTSS program like? What might, depending on your teaching situation, what your structure of your school is like. What programs do you have that would impact upon instruction, like one-on-one laptops or using iPads and the like. So we're going to look at the community, district, and the school. Typically, a response in that small little box would expand like this, using different statistics from different sources, which we'll show you where to get in just a moment. But let's find out first what your contextual factor of the school and district is like. Then you're going to look at the factors in your classroom. Here it's a lot of times a count, that is, how many ethnic students do you have? They're Afro-American, Hispanic, and the like. Do you have any language proficient, non-proficient students? Do you have any special needs, and what categories are they in? So you kind of list those numbers. So if you have a class of 25, you'd be listing how many students are maybe in those areas. And sometimes you have to take a guess at that, and that which would be fine. Now, to use that, to get that information, especially on your school, you can go to every state has a state report card. Kansas, our Kansas State Department of Education has a report card for every school, giving all kinds of data. So there's Missouri, Oklahoma, wherever you're located. And we show that, we'll give you those sites in the module to make sure you go. For example, in Kansas, you'll go to the KSDE organization report card, and then your search for your school district. And as you see, it'll break down, in Pittsburgh's case, page after page of how many kids they have in each school, ethnic diversity, and the like, what their test scores are like, all kinds of information, which is quite interesting, that will help you fill that section 1 and 2 out. Oklahoma does the same thing. Missouri does the same thing. I've given you those in the module, the sites to go to, so you don't have to look them up yourself. If you do not have a class, we will give you an addendum, which is in the second module, and be in several modules, where you can use a fake sort of set of students. But what we'd ask you to do is maybe choose a school that you went to, maybe, or if you have children, choose that school if you're not teaching, to do the first section of the community of the school makeup. So you can provide that data. When it comes to your classroom, we give you a fake classroom of 25 students. As you can see, we've given you the gender of each of your students, what the ethnicity of each of them are, if they are low SES. And low SES in most cases are defined by whether or not they're on free and reduced lunch. It's not the best way to do it, but it's the way most schools decide who's low SES. This will list how many English language learners do you have. If you have any identified special needs, and you have 2 in this class, both with learning disabilities, they gave you some reading scores above and below, math. And then here and we'll get to this later, but we even give you the assessment results for your pre-test and your post-test, and then 2 formative assessments that you can use. You can decide what the formative assessments are, and you're going to write your pre-test, post-test, but if you need a class with data, this will be your data that you can use to desegregate. So don't worry, if you don't have a class, we're going to fix you up and make it so you can operate. In the contextual factors, again, here's an example of one. It's a 10th grade honors class, and notice they don't have many. They got 2 visually impaired. Well, that's unusual, but didn't have many kids with problems there. But in a minute, we're going to ask you to define a subgroup, and this is your rationale and why you selected 2 different subgroups, which we'll show you in just a minute. We're asked that you look at the intellectual characteristics and the special characteristics, personal characteristics of your kids, and you'll be writing a very brief description of what those 3 areas are like for those students. For those of you without a classroom, we're kind of fictionalize the writing there, but you can base it upon the special characteristics, like you got 2 special needs students, so you can classify what those needs are. But first off, In this section, we'll look at the big picture of your students in your whole class. Typically, here's what that section may, when it's filled out, look like. And so again, you fictional students have that information, which are above and which are below on the reading and math section, so you'll be able to write that using that fictional data. Then part B of your contextual factors, that section, will look at the implication for your whole class. Given your class that you've selected, and for you fictional writers, given what you were given, you're going to provide a narrative of how does that impinge upon what you're going to teach and how you're going to teach. How does this whole class influence your planning, your assessment, your teaching strategies? That a lot of times will entail more factors such as the room, the equipment you have, the environment, a lot of different factors that, again, we'll talk about when it comes to instructional planning that you could include when it comes to implications upon planning your unit. And then you'll be looking at, and this is the interesting part, selecting two subgroups that you're going to focus on when it comes to your data. And we'll ask you to disaggregate the data, test results for your pre and post test to see, did any subgroups perform better than others. A lot of times students for the subgroup will choose gender. It's real easy. Did the boys do better than the girls? And in the state of Kansas in the late 1990s and early 2000, math scores for males were higher than females, upper math scores in the state of Kansas. And so some of the QPA focuses were on evening the difference between boys and girls when it came to chemistry or trigonometry and sciences like chemistry, but because there was a statewide difference. You might also look at ethnicity, how different subgroups do, to see which ethnic group did better, and maybe speculate for what reason, or if your low SES didn't do as well as your regular students. So there's all kinds of ways. If you're a PE teacher, you might look at those that have played sports before, those that haven't. So yeah, you've got a wide variety of ideas, and the different teacher work samples we provide for you will show a lot of different ways that our past students have chosen their subgroups. But again, you will not mention any one student in any of those subgroups. And then you provide a narrative for underneath there, under D, why you selected those subgroups. Why did you want to see if the males did better than the females, or why was ethnicity one thing that you would look for? So give us a reason for why you did that. So here's what it might look like. Again, this student chose to do gender, and she's going to see if the 9 females did better than the males, and she focused on one male that was intellectually gifted, but he's not doing well. So they're going to see. So she shows one student, but typically you're going to choose groups. But she tells us why the student was selected for blah, 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 blah. So why did you choose it? And then what's the intellectual, social, and personal characteristics of that subgroup? And here's her narrative, why she chose gender and why she chose one student, giving us an explanation. So in essence, you're going to choose in that section a subgroup. KSDE and Missouri State Department of Education websites, Oklahoma State Department websites give you building report cards for every school in that state. Use that data, and what you can actually do is on this on their websites, just slide it over and you can put it into your document. Yeah, because we're going to have a reference page, so you can use those pie charts in your appendix for that section. So in essence, the first section is going to look at the contextual factors, what your community is like, what your school is like, what your individual classroom is like that you're going to do your teacher work sample in. If you don't have a classroom, not teaching yet, we're going to have you choose a school that interests you, that maybe you went to or is down the road from you, and then make up a class so that we give you all the data of how they did and what they are comprised of. So that is section 1, the contextual factors. Next, we'll look at the second section in the instructional planning. So I'll see you in that section.